Hey, what's going on out there? Today I'm gonna basically give you what I promised, that real detailed breakdown of the evolution of MMA and UFC, and I'll start to break down and show you some of the false dogmas of MMA and some of these false myths that have been born from the beginning of MMA. So I'll show you, how these were created, and I'll show you how they're false. And I'll show you how they're going to be proven to be false in the ring also, and they're doing that right now. So basically, what I'm saying is MMA fighters are lacking tremendously when it comes to skill and striking. Now, 80 to 85% of MMA fighters are, on a scale of 1 to 10, are about 3 or 4 at best at striking, and this is due mostly because they mostly train in grappling and wrestling techniques. Probably 70% compared with a little bit of striking, and they think that striking is basically a byproduct of the grappling and wrestling, but that's the bulk, and that's what MMA fighting is. Okay, and this was all built through dogmas and myths, and that's why they have this mentality. But the fighters who are breaking these myths, who are not, who are emphasizing more striking and making sure that they're the more skilled strikers, are the ones that's cutting above the rest. Your Anderson Silvas, who's Muay Thai, now bringing in boxing, and Aikido. Your Lyoto Machidas, who comes from karate background, bringing in the Aikido. GSP, who's come from karate background, bringing in some boxing. And then BJ Penn, who's from your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, but made his career to the higher levels when he started to learn boxing and dominated through his striking ability. Your Jose Aldo's, your John Jones, who's a wrestler, but still his advantage was his dynamic striking. Okay, so this is the key to that. So what has happened this weekend was a perfect example of that. The first fight, Lyoto Machida versus Randy Couture. Randy's old, you could give that, but even in his heyday, he wouldn't have been able to beat Lyoto Machida because he wouldn't have been able to strike. He would have been just trying to get some strikes in to try to get him against the fence, and Lyoto Machida is not going to let that happen. He's going to keep him off. He's going to use his takedown defense. Because he learned the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, of course. He learned how to take down defense, but then he's using his superior striking as the difference maker in the fight. And he showed that he's bringing in new techniques from traditional martial arts that have been in MMA myth they're not effective, or they're not proven to be effective. And like I said, I'll show where that's not true, and they're showing that, hey, these techniques do work, or at least some of them, just like any discipline. Some of them work, some of them may not work, for different people. So basically, that was the first fight. Second fight, what do you have? Jose Aldo versus Mark Hamidi. Jose Aldo, the dynamic striker. We saw that he needs to have a little bit more conditioning, but he definitely was the more explosive, dynamic striker. And Mark Hamidi stayed in that fight because of his skill striking. If he didn't have the skill striking that he had, he would have been just these regular MMA guy who would have been a good grappler, good wrestler, but very mediocre striker. He would have been out in the second round. Jose Aldo would have finished him off, even in being tired. He would have dominated him easily. But the fact that, like I said, Mark Hamidi was such a good striker, that's what kept him in the fight. Last fight, what do we have? The GSP versus the Jake Shields. Perfect. Jake Shields represents the MMA guy. Like I said, the MMA guy that, that is just the grappler, the wrestler with some very primitive type striking. GSP didn't even basically put himself in any type of danger. Just mediocrely just struck with him because he knew I could keep from him taking me down. That's all I really need to worry about. Other than that, I can just easily beat him this way, and that's why it was a pretty boring fight, because GSP wasn't going to take any shots there. There was no need to. I could beat him easily by just boxing him. And it kind of caused him, because he was a little timid, so he got caught with more things than he thought he would. But it was because of the striking that wrestling grappling was non-effective. Like I said, and this is where it's going to. Now I'm going to break down the history and how this myth and all these dogmas have been born out of it, okay? So we have to go back all the way back to 1993 when the first UFC was started, UFC 1, which was an 8-man tournament. It was an 8-man tournament, and the whole point of the 8-man tournament was to pit style versus style, to try to see who was what was the most superior style. This was before, it wasn't called mixed martial arts. Everybody who came in there, most people were doing, only had one style of fighting, and you know what I'm saying, and they were pitting it up to each other. And this was put together by the Gracies. Everybody knows the Gracies. I don't have to go into explaining that. Okay, this was put together by the Gracies. Why? Because they were trying to prove that their martial art, which was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, was superior to these other arts, mainly the striking arts. Okay, how were they doing this? Well, first of all, you have to get the history of how they set this up, first of all, and a little bit of history about martial arts and martial art cultures, customs, and their competitions that come out of these cultures and customs in the 20th century in these peace times. Okay, so basically, Brazilian, they put this together because they have been fighting this way, in this manner, for 40 years already in Brazil, in Vale Tudo tournaments. Okay, so these tournaments were just like that. So they were already experienced in this style of fighting. Them and the shoot fighters that were in there in the first tournaments. Okay, so they were already experienced. So this was their culture. Because what happens in martial arts culture, every style, like I said, has its culture, has its customs, and has its tournaments that they fight. And usually the people, you know, who practice a certain style stay within their customs, stay within their competitions. And that's because of the style war, which is unfortunate, you know what I'm saying? But that's what's being broke down. That's what Bruce Lee was talking about, these style wars. So anyway, most stay in their realm. So most of the time you go to a judo competition, you're not going to see a taekwondo guy, and you're not going to see a karate guy, you know what I'm saying, maybe one or two. You know, you go to a karate tournament, you may see a kung fu guy, but you're not going to see a kido guy, you're not going to see a judo guy. You know, they pretty much stay within their realms and their customs and the way particular that they fight and their systems. So this is how culture, you know, martial arts culture is. So the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they already had this culture, they already had this competition, they are already used to fighting in this manner. And also, they had been training and experimenting pretty exclusively on how can they defeat a striker, because they knew that's what they were going to be you know, encountering, because around the world that's what fighting really meant to most people, especially in the era of boxing, Muhammad Ali, these types of things. You know, Joe Louis, you know the fellas. People who wanted, you know, striking, you know what I'm saying, kung fu theater, people wanted striking. So they knew they were going to be fighting strikers. So they trained and experimented, had, you know, this to test this and how they were supposed to, you know, fight against strikers. Okay, so they had plenty of experience in this. So this tournament was a more advantage to them and the other shoot fighters that were in the tournament, because they had more experience. This was their realm, this is what they understood, this is what they knew. And they had already been training in that manner of fighting against strikers, where the strikers coming from these other disciplines, first of all, this was out of their element, this wasn't like their types of tournaments or competitions, and also they hadn't had the experience of fighting against grapplers. And this was the difference. They didn't have that experimentation and stuff like that. So this gave the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the shoot fighters already advantage in the first ones. But either way, it was just 8 fighters coming from different martial arts: karate, savate, shoot fighting, a myriad of martial arts. But basically only 8 people. And these 8 people, you know what I'm saying, they're supposed to go style for style, and this is supposed to really ultimately tell us who's the superior style. As you can see, that's kind of silly. It's just 8 people, and everybody, you know, supposed to represent everybody in their discipline, you know what I'm saying, and this is just to prove everything. So first of all, that you know, that was silly, but the whole point of it was style versus style. Okay, the striking arts did fine. Actually, the Royce Gracie won the tournament. He wanted it, beating the Savate fighter, who had you know, a couple of KOs before. So, and another one of the karate guys. I mean, they were KOing people, and the kung fu guys, they were KOing people, including not KO, but they were beating. Royce Gracie was getting beat down. He was getting beat down for a minute and a half for most of those fights. So it was proven that these striking arts were effective, but it definitely had holes, and it definitely had a whole avenue that it hadn't explored and needed to explore and experiment with. You know what I'm saying? But Gracie, I mean, it's not like this, you know, MMA as you see now. Gracie would literally, you see him out there and you can tell he's the less talented, he's the less athletic. He's not even really trying to hit you. He's just pawing at you and doing a little kick to your shin just to keep you, just so he can try to grab you. And he'd usually be getting beat down, bloody pulped, and he'd grab onto something like a child may grab onto your leg and then get somebody down, pull into guard, and then they were a fish out of water, and then he would submit him. So he won the first two tournaments, Royce Gracie, and what this basically says is, you know, he basically is saying that the striking arts proved that they work, they were effective, but they had some holes, and like I said, they had to experiment more. Okay, but the way that it's seen in the myth that come out is that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu pumped that they were that were a superior martial art to these other arts, or the grappling arts were superior to these other martial arts. So that's what they start building from these first UFC fights. Okay, which was not, like I said, that's not true. We know that it's just a bigger picture. We see the variables that came into it and an advantage they had fighting in those first tournaments. Okay, so basically what happened was, now this UFC, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wasn't popular because people didn't like that. People wanted to see people getting knocked out, especially here in America. They want to see people getting knocked out. They want to see people getting tagged. They definitely didn't want to see a guy who was definitely looking, I mean, just timid and scared, and next thing you know, he'd grab and just hold on to you, and then he'd pull in some lock. They didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. So they were not fans of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and its ultimate fighting. Okay, but when it comes down to in the realm of and the culture of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappling, this is, hey, we're the best. We're the best. We're proving that right now. Okay, now the third UFC was won by a ninjutsu guy, a traditionalist. Like I said, further proving that, like I said, these traditional arts they work. Like I said, you just have to put together a whole, you know what I'm saying, a whole program and a whole complete game. Now, Royce Gracie, he won all his matches, but he had to drop out because of too much damage. He basically was hurt because like I said, he was getting his ass kicked in these things. He was winning these things, but he was getting his ass kicked. If it was an after-school fight, people would say he got his ass kicked. He broke the other dude's arm, but he got his ass kicked. You know what I'm saying? So either way, like I said, this is further proving. But as that started happening, you know what I'm saying, and some of these grappling arts were winning more, of course, they were pumping this myth that grappling arts were proving to be superior, and this was real combat, and all these other things were, you know what I'm saying, they were just, like I said, they were not effective, these other striking arts. This was played for movies and stuff like that. Even kickboxing and Muay Thai at that time, they didn't respect these arts. Okay, and then because you had the people dominating, Dan Severns and the shoot fighters, and you know, Mark Coleman's, and then that's what inspired a lot of the wrestlers to come in to the game. The Tito Ortiz, the Matt Hughes, the Carlos Newtons, the Randy Couture's. These what brought these guys in. Okay, and they realized, okay, all I have to do is learn some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or some submission grappling. You know what I'm saying? I have no other avenue to go to. This is my avenue because this is turned into that culture, which has been that culture. It's a grappling culture. So this is what naturally will be more people who participate into it, is grapplers. So wrestlers just automatically migrated to that